Welcome, cyber travelers. This is Cyber Circuits from Project Spectrum. My name is Rick. I'm your friendly neighborhood host. Just think of me as your Obi-Wan of Wi-Fi. I'm here to guide you through the galaxy of cyber defense. And today's adventure is called I Can See Clearly Now, identifying, valuing, and defending your critical assets. Because step one of fighting any cyber villains isn't grabbing a lightsaber. It's figuring out what you actually need to do to protect your data and what you actually need to protect. And trust me, those attackers out there, they already have you on their radar, whether you're Stark Industries or just a 5-person shop with a shared Dropbox account. Now, joining us today, our guest is Tina Williams-Koroma. Tina, am I pronouncing that right?
Yes, I'll come off mute. Yes.
There we go. She's desperately,
yes, you do.
desperately trying to find the mute button.
I gotta find it. I tell you, it feels like that button moves as soon as I gotta look for it.
Every single time. It should be every button on your keyboard is what it should be.
Right.
Well, Tina is the founder and CEO of CyDeploy, CyDeploy Inc. And Tina has well over 2 decades of experience across the cybersecurity landscape. Her career has taken her from Lockheed Martin, where she developed software enterprise use, to Unisys, where she handled projects for the Department of Justice and the Department of Homeland Security. Recognizing the industry's growing need for AI-driven solutions, Tina launched CyDeploy Inc., an automated platform that tests the impact of security updates on IT infrastructure before deployment, helping businesses maintain both security and operational continuity. So everyone, please give a warm welcome to Tina. And Tina, go ahead. Before we go ahead and get started, go ahead and tell folks just a little bit about yourself that I haven't already said.
Yeah, so that you haven't already said, cybersecurity, the way I first got into it was in watching the movie The Net with Sandra Bullock, to date myself a bit. Love that movie. And I was like, what career is she in that she's doing work on the beach? And so, it took me 20 years into my career before I actually had a conference that was at a beach and I had my laptop out there with me. So felt a little bit misled, but nonetheless, I've enjoyed a career in this field. I'm an avid soccer player, started at 7, played in college, and still play now very competitively. So, just the notion, I love making analogies between cyber and soccer. So you'll probably read or hear posts making those connections from me on a regular basis.
Fantastic. No, we love it. And trust me, I throw in plenty of references throughout. So it's good. I always say analogies are good. It helps people understand. And anybody who's going to roll their eyes at any of the ones that we're going to throw out there, that's why they're not on camera. So, all right. So, and then to introduce myself, my name is Rick. Again, I work with the Project Spectrum team. I'm also the communications lead for Move America. I work closely with industry, government, and academia. And, I've been doing this for quite a while, really love hosting these sessions, and I'm really excited to have this session today. And then, of course, I would be remiss if you want to learn more about Move America, please go ahead and visit our website at moveamerica.org. So just a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. Just let you know, your microphone is muted and your camera is off, except for you, Tina. Your microphone and camera need to stay on. But the rest of you, you're going to be muted. Cameras are going to be off. And we do that for a particular reason. A dog is going to think that the Amazon delivery person is a national security threat, or a cat comes walking across the keyboard. We have lots of those different scenarios, but just letting everybody know that that's going to be happening today. Please make sure you see how your name is displayed for others to see. Again, if you're, Galaxy 123, we might think that you're coming from somewhere else in the universe, and an intergalactic traveler who's interested in cybersecurity. Mom's iPad every now and then comes up. We get all kinds of names. Just make sure your name is displaying exactly how you want it to see or to be seen by others. And then again, because everything is turned off, your only way to communicate is to use the chat box. So you could use the chat function at any time during this webinar to ask questions. The Project Spectrum team is standing by. We'll go ahead and answer questions with Tina at the end, and we're going to have a good time today. But want to remind you, especially with the chat box, please be respectful. If anybody says something, please don't feel you have to chime in. Even if your remark you think is very funny or very poignant, remember they're asking questions of our guest, and they're asking questions of the Project Spectrum team. So I want to make sure everybody stays respectful. Please, no self-promotion. Everybody has a business. Everybody has a side hustle. Everybody has a purpose in this life. And we appreciate yours, but this is not the time or place to go ahead and put those through. So again, questions, keep it to questions or to comments that are poignant, and we'll make sure that we're addressing those as we can. Now, I would be remiss if I did not say that we have to let you know what's going on with Project Spectrum. Project Spectrum, of course, is a Department of Defense supported effort through the Office of Small Business Programs to help any size business. It doesn't matter if it's a small business, a medium business, a large business. It doesn't matter if it's an academic institution. It doesn't matter if it is a government agency. We've got all kinds of cybersecurity tools, training, and resources that are available for just about anybody. You sign up for free. We don't sell your information. We always make sure that we protect that. And we provide you, again, with everything from training courses to templates to toolkits to dashboards. You can see everything here that's available on Project Spectrum. We love having you visit our website. And again, that is projectspectrum.io. Please go ahead, visit there. If you're not registered, go ahead and get registered today. See all the stuff that you can access at any time. All right, so with that said, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen, and we're going to go ahead and put us up full screen on there. There we are. So again, Tina, thank you so much for joining us. I think what we're going to do is we're going to start out with the cyber landscape. We're going to find out exactly what's going on out there. So let's take a look at the cyber window, right? Because right now the digital weather report is stormy with 100% chance of phishing, right? The threat landscape is not slowing down. It's scaling up faster than the internet can speculate about Taylor Swift's engagement ring and how much Travis actually spent on that thing. And it ranges from defense contractors to the coffee shop on the corner. No one is flying under the radar out there. So, Tina, from your vantage point, what's the state of play out there?
Yeah, I like to take a very macro look from a global perspective at the landscape, and it's a metric that I'm keeping a pulse on, and that's the cost of cybercrime globally, which is in the trillions, and the budgets, the amount of budgets globally allocated for cybersecurity is in the billions. So when you look at what the cost is versus what is available or being allocated to address the cost, there is a gap there, and that gap continues to grow. And that tells me that the overall forecast is cybersecurity status quo is not tenable for the long term in the way that things are currently going. And we'll certainly get into this more, but with AI, while AI is great on the side of protecting ourselves, we have to understand that AI is also very productive and effective for those launching attacks, developing exploits, and the like. So you almost get to a neutralized state of AI with regard to cybersecurity, and it requires taking a fundamentally different approach to cybersecurity.
Now, when you say a fundamentally different approach, how do you think, because I think a lot of people, what they don't realize is that the problems are not all technology problems, because I think that's what a lot of people think. If I have the newest computer and I have the newest antivirus software and I have all of the state-of-the-art bells, whistles, gadgets, and stuff like that, that I'm absolutely protected. But that's not really the case, is it?
It's not. And the current status quo where a bulk of cybersecurity investment goes is into detection and response systems. You absolutely need that technology in place. That's a core part of the cybersecurity framework, even with regard to the functional areas, detection and response. So it's not to say that those are not needed. But it is to say that a lot of attention and time and investment has not been going into the identify and the protect parts of the cybersecurity framework. That means the upfront work of even knowing what your environment includes in detail, right? Not just, oh, we've got X number of servers and X number of workstations. Oh, and half of them are Windows and half are Linux. Well, what version, what patch level? When exploits come out, they're typically very specific to applications, to versions, to patch levels, right? And so it's really important to understand what's in your environment. That's a part of identification. An attack surface. Just looking at, again, this goes back to knowing what's in your environment. Everything in your environment becomes a place in which they can attack. And this is one of my soccer analogies, definitely comes out. I play as a striker, right? And the best goalies, the ones that are my biggest nuisance, are the ones that know how to position themselves in such a way that it minimizes the amount of the goal open to me to score on or within, right? And I think about that in much the same way with cybersecurity and our environments and our inventory. When you reduce your attack surface, you remove devices you're no longer using, you disconnect ones that no longer serve their purpose. You get really clear on exactly what it is in your environment and what you actually need, and you remove everything else. Right? Like that is reducing the attack surface so that there's less area to attack and less ways to get in. So that's, a part of a fundamental change, a lot of businesses. And then just configurations, like it's a very, very, very tasking. I spoke to one customer prospect, and they indicated it took them about 5 years to methodically go through the Center for Internet Security CIS benchmarks and for those recommended configuration settings and secure their devices. They had to check each setting to make sure that it wouldn't disrupt their business applications and their business process. So they had to step through each of those security settings one by one. Does this break anything? Do our systems still operate? Get to the place where they had maybe one or two security configurations for their servers and one or two for their workstations, like limiting it to just a few different configurations in their environment. So now when they go through and need to patch or update, there's not a whole lot of things they need to really test, not a lot of variations they need to test for. That kind of work can be really hard up front, but that's what organizations really need to methodically go through and do. Focus on the identification and the protection part up front and not just put such a overwhelming portion of their investments in detect and respond. Once somebody's in your house, okay, you see them, maybe you can limit them from stealing the gold watch and the wedding ring, right? Because you see them in time, but they're in your house. They're going to get something, some damage is going to get done, right? So that's what I mean when I say a fundamentally different approach. We've got to switch or even out where our investment is being made from a time and resources perspective.
Right. So if you're talking to business owners, right? Or, again, anybody in any type of organization, but particularly let's look at the smaller ones or the less experienced ones with this. How do they even start the scavenger hunt for critical assets in identifying? You'd have to think they're thinking about it like spring cleaning for the network. You pull everything out of the closet, figure what's actually valuable versus what's just gathering dust. Because a lot of these businesses don't understand, that forgotten laptop that's in the server closet, that's been there for years. That's like the equivalent of leaving milk in the office fridge for 6 months. It's going to eventually get found, and it's not going to be very pleasant when you do. So, what exactly what should companies be looking for, and how should they be looking at things when they're trying to identify their crown jewels?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's really important to first understand what business you're in and the kind of data that you have. I know that sounds really basic, but a lot of cybersecurity and how you prioritize things is based upon your business. Ultimately, cybersecurity is there and needed and in place to protect the mission, to protect your business, right? Like, so it's really important to understand what business you're in and the kind of data that you have. As an example, you know, worked with and supported a customer in the healthcare space. And so, when you look at it from that perspective, you're thinking through, okay, what are our core systems, our tier one systems that we are that we have and that are core and critical to us delivering services and our mission as a healthcare organization to our customers. Once you go through that and say, okay, these are the core ones, well, then it's asking, okay, well, what infrastructure do we have that's supporting that? What servers are a part of those tier one systems? What network devices? And so doing a discovery, a system discovery to understand what those core applications are and the infrastructure that supports it, and making sure that you're clear. Okay, we know what these 5 servers are. We know that this workstation is connected. And wait, what's that? What is this one over here? Like, there should only be 5 servers. What's this other one that, a core server is talking to? We need to figure that out, because if it's talking to it and connected to it, that is an entryway or an entry point, connection into your tier one application. And if you don't know about it, it's, highly likely that you're also not keeping it up to date, or making sure it's configured properly, et cetera. So, for even small businesses, take the time to just document your inventory. And this is just like a business practice. I know for us as a company, it's a combination between our cybersecurity team and our operations team to keep an inventory list, an asset list, right? Like, anytime there's a purchase of a new asset, we are tracking, what we purchased, who it was assigned to, who has this laptop, if somebody offboards, it's a part of our offboarding procedures to make sure we get that laptop back, that it gets returned, to where we're storing our devices. If it gets reassigned, we see the new person that it's assigned to. So just as a small business, keeping track, even if it's just a spreadsheet, each time you're making a purchase of a device, an external storage device, a new laptop, a server, a piece of network equipment, that should be a part of your business operations practice, not even just seeing it as a separate cybersecurity discipline, to keep track of and know and understand all of the hardware purchases that you're making. And same with software. When you're purchasing a software license, right? Understand what that purchase is. I also recommend making sure that not every end employee has admin rights to their laptop. I know that makes it easy and convenient, but it also introduces security risk, because then they can just be downloading and installing a bunch of different applications from, places unknown, as they're also logging into your email or file sharing system, right? So they could be introducing exploits that you are unaware of. So, spending the time to, go through and ensure that only a couple of people in the organization, if you're a small business, maybe even one, have administrative permissions on systems, so that they're controlling what gets installed, and that the only applications installed are those that you have purchased or approved of explicitly. And that becomes a part of your software inventory.
Right. And then I'm sure that has to do with one of the big blind spots that organizations often see which are employees bringing their personal devices and connecting them to the network. Because, I am that type of person. I'm a dyed-in-the-wool Mac guy, and having to use a PC feels like somebody has tied an anchor around my neck and I'm pulling it and dragging it along the concrete. And at first it bothers me, but I do realize, because if I just connect my personal laptop to the company network, I have full reign over what I install on my laptop. I have full reign over what I do on my laptop or on my computer. And that's scary when it comes to cybersecurity, because once again, you never know that somebody's in the house until they take something.
Right. Yeah.
And so there could be people lurking in my laptop right now, and I don't want to, I don't want to take my house and connect it to a larger house and have them rob my boss blind, right?
Right. Right. Exactly. Yeah. And, I think staying with that line of thought on a small business's side, there's ways in which, even with SaaS solutions like Google Workspace, where you can set it up if you have the appropriate Google Workspace license to where only specific IP addresses can connect into your Google Workspace, right? And so that's something that could be helpful, because then that means that, employees can't just log into their Google Workspace account from their phones, right? Or log in from their personal computers. They actually have to be using one of your company's laptops to be able to access or log in, right? And so that's just like a device-based, sort of authentication that's required. So it's not just that you have an account for your company's Google Workspace with email and file sharing, but you have to be connecting in from a specific device
Right.
issued by the company.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I'm happy to pause there.
Very good. Now, and then I was going to say the other thing that I think could be damaging to an organization. So I wanted to get your take on this is, especially when you said like you've got to take an inventory of everything, right?
Mhm.
We have these legacy or forgotten systems, and it's not just hardware. Again, I made the joke earlier about the laptop that's been collecting dust in the server closet, but it's not just that. I mean, how many companies will have like a Google Workspace, and then something happens and somebody loses the password, or and or you decide to change environments, but you don't clean all of that out, and then you're not maintaining it, you're not managing it, and it's a prime way for any threat actor to get your company's information, because again, you're not managing it, you're not protecting it, the password's not being changed, you've forgotten it's even there.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. And that's not only true for human accounts. We can lose track of human accounts, login accounts for individuals. But a lot of organizations also have service account, non-human accounts, non-human identities. You might hear that referred to as like NHIs now, right? Just as if we needed another acronym running around in the cyber world. But there's non-human accounts or non-human identities. And so these non-human accounts are things like service accounts that, are running a particular script, right? You want something to happen across all of the devices in your environment. So, you write this script that some service account is able to execute. Those service accounts often have elevated privileges themselves in order to, undertake whatever service, they're scripted to provide. And so a lot of times, some member of the tech team may have created that 10 years ago. That person takes another job. It's just been running and working fine, and people know that certain things happen, but aren't really clear on what every non-human or service account really does. And so they're afraid to delete it. But at the same time, it isn't or hasn't necessarily been, getting updated with its like password being changed periodically, or, just small stuff like that. So yeah, I again really want to comment on how cybersecurity is not an isolated discipline. And I think it's important to keep that perspective, because as a part of the HR process of onboarding and offboarding, account provisioning should be a part of that process. One of the things that most cyber frameworks are looking to connect is users and user access. And there should be a process. Somebody comes in as a new employee, what do they need to have access to? Keeping track of that access and the accounts that are associated, with the company. When they leave the company, removing their access from, resources, as well as, deactivating their account. That is a very common cybersecurity control, but it is very much so a human resources driven function. Also, right, with the onboarding and offboarding processes.
Right.
And the inventorying, as I mentioned, is very much so an operations activity with cybersecurity implications. Yes.
Yeah, and that's what a lot of businesses need to understand. This doesn't just reside with the IT department. It really does have to go throughout the organization. But I'm glad you went back to like inventory processes, because I wanted to ask you, particularly for the smaller businesses out there where you're talking 5 employees, everybody's wearing 10 hats. And, it's okay, now we got to inventory everything, and now we got to map all of our assets. I mean, is there anything out there that could help them so that it's not looking at, the daunting process of creating a spreadsheet that's going to run for, 3,640 lines?
Right. Yeah. Honoring that we're not selling, but to be helpful, certainly CyDeploy, we actually were funded by Google to create a version of our software that is something that startups and small businesses could use. And so we pulled out features of CyDeploy and made a free community edition. And instead of doing it for a limited time, we just have it available now. So, if you go to cydeploy.com/owlthis, there is a community edition that you can use. It'll do a device inventory. So if you run CyDeploy owlthis on, your main laptop, it'll tell you what other devices your device is talking to, right? So it's looking at, are you connecting into like an Amazon or AWS, resource, or, it'll tell you what home, if you're connected to your home router, what you're connected to. And it'll also do an application inventory. So it'll tell you all the applications that are running on your device and what version is running on the device. So that provides you with, your a hardware inventory in the way of, what else is your, main laptop talking to, and what are all the applications and their versions that are running.
No, and that's
your
fantastic.
Yeah.
No, that's fantastic that you're helping, because that's really the hard part.
Yes.
The mapping out the gadgets, the apps, again, the dusty servers from the Jurassic period. All of that is a little bit daunting for companies, and so that it's great that you've got a resource out there. Now, I've got to ask this. So let's switch gears a little bit, because now once you've identified those assets, then you've got to start making judgment calls, right?
Yes.
Which ones are your all-stars? Which ones are the interns fetching coffee? And really, I mean, it's, I again, use the analogy, but it's really mission critical versus what's just a nice to have. So how do organizations start to figure that out?
So it really is going back to what business am I in and what kind of data am I collecting? Understanding if this system or this data were somehow compromised, whether that's I'm no longer able to get to it myself, an availability issue, If it is where somebody who shouldn't be able to see it can see it, they steal it as a confidentiality issue, or if somebody is able to modify or muck around with the data, making it unreliable, so messing with the integrity of it. Which systems and which data would just wreak havoc in our business if the confidentiality, integrity, or availability were compromised? And that is really the foundation of how you determine or look at what are our crown jewels with our organization, is
Right.
understanding and asking those questions.
And then I think it also, we have to also lean toward, it's not just what happens within your walls as well, or within your environment. It's also what's happening with the customers that you're looking to serve, or again, if you're part of the supply chain, because that critical and sensitive information on your part, yes, that's definitely something you need to protect. But then there might be something that a partner is sharing that you may not know whether it's critical or sensitive, but you kind of have to err on the side of caution.
Mm-hmm.
Or you've got regulatory requirements. You know, again, anybody looking to sell to the Department of Defense, you've got all of the different rules and regulations, every part of the procurement and the DFARS, and you know,
Right.
you really have to. It's tough to stay up on that, but you know, this is critical when it comes to a company protecting, you know, their assets, because again, in order to defend them, you have to know what needs defending with, the five people with lightsabers that are, you know, standing there at the ready, or, you know, what's going to get defended with the, you know, again, sorry to go back to a Star Wars analogy, but the stormtroopers who couldn't hit the broadside of a barn if they everything they shoot at they miss, you know, so yeah, but they look tough. They look really daunting, but you know, anybody who knows pretty much knows I'm going to just run through the laser beams because they're not going to be able to hit me. But yeah, so, you know, again, I think a lot of it has to do with that. And is that something that you tend to help people with?
Yeah, it is. And so when you're looking at the types of data, it is, and I'm glad that you emphasize that. It's not just your internally looking. Some of the most sensitive data you really have is your customers' data. So if you've got customers across multiple sectors, defense, maybe some health, it's important, if their data is going to be in your systems, that you understand what it is that they have to comply with, right? Like this is how that data needs to get protected. Wherever that data is on their systems or yours, there are standards for how it needs to get protected. So from a CyDeploy perspective, CyDeploy is very focused on a technology and a solution, and, you know, can certainly support, you know, the identifying of devices and applications and versions, and, you know, the non-free version then goes into digital twins, so you can test out updates before you deploy them into production and things like that. But very much so a product play. Separately, if CEO of one company wasn't enough, you know, I'm a glutton for cybersecurity. On the services side, yes, like that with T-Secure, my company, that's what we focus on. It is very much so on helping organizations to build and maintain effective cyber programs. And so that's a part of where we start, is helping them to understand what data you have, you know, what kind of regulations govern it, what kind of data not only do they have about their business, but other customers. So whatever data is in their systems and what governs that data, and then helping them walk through the process of understanding the appropriate security controls, both technical and non-technical, that need to be in place to properly protect their environments. And for smaller businesses, we did start a clinic. So for those that, you know, need protections and things like that, there is a cybersecurity clinic where it's not, you know, reduced expertise, but because it is coming through a clinic, it's reduced cost to be able to get cybersecurity help.
No, and that's great. And then let me ask you this. What are some of the factors you see that are often overlooked when people are evaluating their assets? Again, to try to determine what's critical and what's sensitive and what needs to be, what needs to be protected to keep me on the side of regulatory compliance or contract compliance. What are some of the things that you see that businesses end up, they just look right past that because it's just out of sight, out of mind.
Yeah, I don't know that there's necessarily like one piece of data, but I think that sometimes what's overlooked is how a combination of data can be very valuable, right? Like, so on the defense side, a lot of times that's looked at as like OPSEC, right? Operation security, where it's not just this one piece of information itself that's so valuable, but if I can get this piece of information plus this other piece of information, suddenly like that's very valuable or sensitive. So, if you think about, I'll use a simple example of, an organization saying like, yeah, I mean, we just keep, points of contact for our customers, over here is a sheet. Like names aren't necessarily that sensitive, et cetera. We keep that in a separate spreadsheet. So it's fine. But if you have this, other spreadsheet, that has other, customer information, more detailed information about that customer, if someone's easily able to take like, oh, well, here's this list over here, which is just names by itself, not that valuable per se. But if I can take that and then, also get this other spreadsheet that you have, and I'm able to kind of correlate that information, suddenly this name I can use as a key to unlock, a bunch more about the customer, right? Here's like the vulnerabilities that this customer who's associated with this client who is associated with these vulnerabilities has, right? Like, so I think sometimes it's just about understanding that while, you could think that there's not a whole lot of sensitivity with one set of data, if an adversary is able to kind of connect the dots of that information, maybe something that you post publicly that in and of itself for social media isn't that sensitive, but if they're able to get some other aspect of information or data from you and combine it, that's what I think is sometimes just overlooked. It's just kind of the broader picture of what exactly you're putting out there publicly, what may be, in your environment that you do recognize as sensitive, and just the ability for people to be able, adversaries to be able to connect those dots. I also think that, it's not necessarily like the data that's overlooked, but some of it being just the practices. And I think you brought it up, Rick, earlier when you were talking about your Mac. And that is, yes, while you might have all the protections in place, like with your Google Workspace or, your Microsoft 365 environment, yeah, we've configured that, but kind of overlooking how you or your employees are able to connect in to that environment, that is a big deal, right? It's so convenient to just be able to connect in with your phone, but what kind of protections do you have on your phone? Do individual employees have on their phone or their personal laptops, right? I think sometimes like that notion of, well, I'm just connecting my personal device, like that shouldn't really matter, to where I'm connecting into, like the business stuff is secure. Well, whatever you open your business up to from a device perspective does matter, right? And so sometimes just like that connection of thought, I think is something that is easily overlooked. And the last thing I'll say about that is just, it's not so much overlooked, but maybe not even a thought. Like convenience is often prioritized. It can blind to like security issues, right? It's just like convenience comes first and almost like supersedes everything else. So I'll call it like the convenience blinder maybe. where it's just like, I have a job to get done. This is the straightest path to getting the line done. And that's just the lens through which I look. And so, that lens does not allow visibility into any other consideration like cybersecurity. It has, I don't know how you want to describe it, but it's a myopic focus.
Right. It really is that tunnel vision. And I think that's what ends up hurting a lot of organizations because, for example, patching, because you were talking about one of the things that you work with CyDeploy is that digital twin environment. So you could see what things are going to do before they actually do them.
Right.
And, because nobody knows. Everybody, I think we've all gotten afraid because, and again, not trying to pick on Microsoft, but Microsoft like ruined it for a lot of us because when you would start installing those updates and then it would take an hour or 2 hours and then suddenly something didn't work right anymore and you're starting to freak out. I mean, it really does make people fear those patches and those critical updates, but those things are absolutely necessary.
Yes, they are. Yeah, and increasingly more so, right? Like, it's very attractive to just, when you're prompted, there are updates available. Would you like to update now? Right? Like, even personally with us on the phone, right? It's just like, I'm just trying to, I just want to use this really quick. I don't have time to wait for like an update right now, right? And so it's easy to just kind of hit snooze. And that's not just on a personal level, but, it's also on like a business level too, right? It's just like, everything's working so well right now. Like, but increasingly, as I had mentioned earlier with AI, like the ability, once a particular vulnerability is known, a new CVE, common vulnerability enumeration, is published, right? Or a patch is published. A patch means there's some sort of issue, right? That issue, the whole, is known now, not just by people who need to make the fix, but also by those that would like to exploit it, right? And so AI now, allows for exploits to be developed a lot faster, right? So like the window in which fixes really need to be made and updates need to be deployed is getting smaller and smaller. And so it's very important that organizations have a well-oiled change process in place. And that just goes back to what I said about not having a whole lot of variation that you need to test in your environment. If you've got like 100 laptops and all of them have 100 different things, running on them, then your ability to test, okay, is this patch going to break this laptop, this laptop, this laptop? Like, you've got a lot of different factors to try to anticipate, right, before you're making a particular change. And that's especially important, like for servers and, like critical servers, for organizations, kind of connecting the dots back to, why an inventory and understanding what your critical assets and things like that are. When there are issues, vulnerabilities or 0-day, threats that come out, that's also how you prioritize where you put in your work and your fixes first, right? You go through and you ensure that you test out and deploy the fixes to your most critical assets first, and then you can get to the other assets. So yeah.
And I think, I think one of the things that people tend to do is, everybody suddenly jumps into cybersecurity mode after a breach, or when they're trying to develop a contract or trying to get into the supply chain or there's something that usually prompts it. But the thing is, cybersecurity, it's almost like, when everybody starts the new year with that New Year's resolution, I'm going to start that new workout routine. You sign up for the gym, you buy the fancy water bottle, and then a month later, the yoga mat is doubling as a cat bed. And I think it's one of the things where cyber defenses tend to run into the same problem. So What kind of setbacks do you see trip organizations up, and how can they push through that cyber burnout?
Yeah, I think it comes back to what I've been saying around like look at it from like a business perspective. And this is one where, I think as a cyber professional, it's kind of a point of tension sometimes. Like compliance frameworks are very helpful in kind of laying the foundation and, making sure, especially if they're mandatory, that is that fire lit, right? That makes it so that you can't back away from the gym, right? It's like, I know that, if I want to do business, with these particular customers, then this is what is necessary. So I feel like compliance frameworks are very, mandatory ones are helpful in that regard. But I think it can also give a false sense, two things. It can give a false sense of cybersecurity sometimes, because compliance does not necessarily equal cybersecurity, right? I think there's been a lot of discussions around that. PCI DSS is like a common one that is referred to, like, all these companies that are compliant, with that particular framework, have also been, compromised still, right? And so I think it's important for businesses to really look at cybersecurity as a part of, as a business function. Like I am doing this because I want to protect my customers, myself, my business, and looking at cybersecurity as it pertains to your business practices. We talked about human resources when you onboard people. I mean, just think about even like your home. I think, in a lot of ways, if even people were to approach securing their businesses and their systems the way they approach their protecting their home and their family, I think that even that prompts a different approach that doesn't necessarily tell you that you need to be like cyber secure, right? We put locks on our home for a reason, right? We our most valuable assets in life are inside that home, right? And so, we put locks, we put alarms, we put ring cameras, outside. We have rules for our kids, right? About where they go and how they engage. We've got all kinds of security controls on our home and on our lives. And I think if you take that same sort of thought in a business perspective and a digital perspective, increasingly, parents are becoming concerned, about like what video games their kids are playing, right? Like what kind of controls are in place already with like TV, apps. It's like you can control what can they view. They need a parental password before you can, change certain settings. So I think, when you think about what you're trying to protect, in our personal lives, we're protecting our homes, our family, our children. But in our business lives, there's also sensitive, things to protect. And I think having that mindset can make it feel less like this, sort of thing, and more like no, this is important to me. And, I want to make sure that I am thinking through how somebody might try to compromise my systems, and how can I be proactive in preventing that. I think having that perspective, and I think it also makes it feel like, well, people get attacked all the time anyway. This billion-dollar company, if they get attacked and they did stuff, like what's the point in me trying to do it? I have a whole lot less resources than them. I think understanding that they that having that shift where even these large billion-dollar companies are putting a lot of investment in detection and response and aren't putting an appropriate investment in the upfront, laying the right groundwork. And so, in cyber insecurity is not inevitable. It's not to say that there's any 100%, guard against it. But I think when you put in your protections up front, that can position you better to not for it to feel like it's just like drudgery and like an attack is just wholly inevitable. So what's the point?
Right. Yeah, and I have to say, I am going to steal that term, cyber insecurity.
Yeah.
Absolutely love that. I'm going
Yes.
to borrow that
Good.
liberally.
Absolutely.
So when you're talking about that cyber insecurity, because again, you patch, segment, you train, you offer up a little prayer to the Wi-Fi deity and do all you do your dance. But there are times that things are still going to feel shaky. But what
Right.
people don't realize is that there is a way that you could flip a switch and turn the bat signal on.
Yes. Yeah.
I know I
Yeah.
went from Avengers to Star Wars to now to now DC, but hey, you got to go where people know.
Yep.
When should businesses say, you know what, we need backup and call in a pro?
So I think there's a lot of really great free resources, right? I think, I mentioned CyDeploys. I think CIS, Center for Internet Security, has a lot of really great free resources as well. I think when it gets to a point where you don't necessarily maybe understand like all the outputs of the tool or how to use all of the free assets available to you, I think that's where at least like a general consultation could be helpful, right? Someone that's able to come in, observe your existing environment, what you have in place, and provide you with almost like a roadmap or a guide, right? I think that's where external help is really necessary, almost to provide like the upfront, and have it in a way where it's just like you can get help like as you need it. Or if you just know like we're completely out of our depths, we have nobody on the team that even knows like we can spell cyber and that's as far as we can get, like it may be helpful to have like a managed service provider, right, or managed system security provider, an MSSP, to help. But even in those cases, recognize that you need to do your due diligence with providers as well, right? Because somebody is doing the work. It's still your systems and your data. So as a small business owner or as like a lead for a larger organization, you can never just close your eyes and hand over the keys. You still need to be asking those same business questions, whether you're going to do the cyber work in-house or you're going to outsource it. You need to be asking the questions around how are you determining what my most sensitive systems is? In what order do you update my systems? Do you test out, before you update stuff for me? Are you testing for the impact? Are you going to break something? Are you maintaining an inventory for me so that, I always, kind of know what's being used? Like, these are questions, whether you're going to handle it in-house or outsource it, it is still your business and still your ultimate responsibility to understand how the technology that is being used to operate your business is being secured. So it's just imperative for, like, even if you think of like accounting, like I'm not like the accounting expert or tax expert or anything like that, but I'm still asking questions, right? It's still incumbent upon me to know the numbers of the business. I might not know all the bean counting procedures behind the scene, but I am still, asking questions and looking to ensure that I understand, aspects of my business, even if I'm not the expert in it, even if I hire experts to come in to do that for me.
Right. All right. So before we wrap things up today, what I'd like to do is I'd like to go ahead and just do a little lightning round here. I like to do just some myth busting because, again, I think a lot of people, these are always frequently asked questions, and so I always like to put this information out there. So I'm going to play with you a round of cybersecurity fact or fiction. Okay. Now I'm going to toss out a claim faster than a streaming service cancels a show right when you're hooked, and then you tell me whether it's the real deal or a total cyber myth. Okay. A business can be too small to be attacked.
Myth.
Total myth. Total myth.
Yeah.
All right. So why do they go after the small guys?
Well, actually, I got a really great example one time in like a small utility that is in a very rural place, is really like maybe one of the only utility available there. But in that rural place, it's supporting a military base. That's what's available. So while that small, very, very small utility, in context of much larger, a much larger utility may seem insignificant, because of who they support, they are very significant. And so, you've seen some legislation, coming out in different states and the like around water utilities and security, right? Because of this, because they are supporting some very critical customers. Same with airports, smaller airports, but can be used as like overflow, for some very significant customers. And so who they support makes them very attractive. And so I was at a conference recently, and they used the term target rich, cyber poor. So a lot of organizations that are very small, but who they support makes them target rich, but not a lot of resources from a cyber perspective. And so, yeah, even if you're a small business, you have to look at who are you supporting? What can make you very attractive no matter how small you are?
All right, let's roll a few more off here. Cybersecurity tools can replace training and policies.
Total myth. Yeah. It's like I said, cybersecurity is a business function, right? And businesses don't tools are there to support the operation of a business. That's why IT was created in the first place. You're not going to get away from policies in business and in business management. A tool is not going to take that away.
All right. What about this one? Cybersecurity is too expensive.
I understand that. I don't know whether to call that a myth per se, but saying it is expensive. I think too expensive, though, has to get balanced with it can, most small businesses don't recover from a successful cyber attack, right? And so, what's really expensive is not being able to operate your business at all and it completely going out. So I certainly think it can be very expensive, but I think that's why, cybersecurity clinics and the like are ones that can be very beneficial to be able to balance the cost.
Excellent. All right. Well, listen. Again, we appreciate all the great information you shared. Tina, this has been absolutely fantastic. So thank you so much. We're going to start to wrap things up. So cyber travelers, as we put a wrap and a bow on today's cyber circuits, again, huge thanks to Tina, founder and CEO of CyDeploy, for helping us sharpen our vision. And we did go ahead and put the link to CyDeploy in the chat. So please feel free to take a look at that. Again, we want to say, thank you for joining us. Zooming out to hit the highlights again: identify, value, defend, phone a friend, but make it a business decision. I think that's the biggest thing. It's not a one and done checkbox. It's a business risk, just like cash flow or customer trust. The difference is the attackers don't wait for your board meeting to strike. So make sure that you are well aware of that. So again, Tina, thank you so much. Want to go ahead and just give a few shout outs and a few parting words here. Folks, my colleague and Project Spectrum's communications lead, Mark, is going to be sending out a link to a survey. Please go ahead and fill that out and let us know how we're doing so that we can, again, continue to tailor these webinars for you. If you're looking for more information from Project Spectrum, you got a few ways to connect with us. ProjectSpectrum.io is the website. Want to make sure that you go there. You can join us for our training webinars. We have these once a month, and our cyber circuits, we have those once a month as well. You can find us on social media. This video will be posted on our YouTube page, along with some other great videos there. And then we also have our LinkedIn page that we want you to follow. And then again, if you want to contact the Project Spectrum team, you could do so through email, or I always tell people, use that virtual help desk. It's that little orange or yellow button down the bottom of the website. Just go ahead and click that, and that'll put you right in touch with them. So again, you've got plenty of ways to get in touch with us. We want to make sure that you continue to do it. So again, thanks to everybody for joining us. We're going to make sure that we send out the replay along with some additional resources to help you to turn today's ideas into action. Thank you again, Tina, for being such a great guest. And thank you everyone on the Project Spectrum team and everyone who has joined us today. Until next time, we want to make sure that you stay alert, stay curious, and remember, resilience is the new superpower. For the Cyber Circuits team, this is Rick saying, have yourself a great day.